Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ISCM's third virtual town hall series of the chapter Turkey. Supply chain and logistics networks need a new design. That is where, being today the last series of the Turkey chapter, we would see discussions in terms of evaluation of logistics, visibility in supply chain, changing consumer behavior, rise of e-commerce, and so on. And our thought leaders will soon join up for the discussions. I would like to thank TEDAR for being our partner. As an institution, we are into education, training, research, and consulting, and we offer certification courses globally in the domain of supply chain, logistics, demand planning, IBP, and also we are well versed for the leadership program. Currently, we are on with the leadership program R4, which helps understand dealing with supply chain in such uncertain world and reimagining your supply chain in the new normal with a strategy for an organization. Do visit our website www.iscmindia.com. Certain ground rules. This platform is on listen only mode, and to all the attendees, there is a control panel on the right hand side wherein you can type in and send your questions in the question section. We will answer them post the panel discussion. Let me go ahead and introduce you to the thought leaders for the day. We have Dr. Emre, Supply Chain Associate Director from UCB. We have Necmettin, Supply Chain Director from Doğadan. We have Enis, Supply Chain Director from Pernod Ricard. We have Nihan, Head of Supply Chain from Kimberly-Clark. Dr. Rakesh Singh, Chairman of Institute of Supply Chain Management, and Shanmukh Singh, an enthusiast at Institute of Supply Chain Management. I welcome you all, and I request all the panelists to join us on stage and request Shanmukh to lead the discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the speakers for accepting my request to participate in this webinar. I would also like to thank the audience for showing up today. We welcome you to the concluding webinar of the ISCM Virtual Town Hall Turkey chapter. In the first town hall, we discussed how to leverage technologies in logistics and supply chain to reduce cost and minimize waste. In the second webinar, we spoke about the resolve to reimagine, recreate, and restore supply chain planning post the COVID crisis. You can check these out on our YouTube page, ISCM SCM Pro. Coming to the third webinar, we will be discussing supply chain, logistics, and network designs and how we can optimize these networks to create resilient, reliable, sustainable, bionic, robust, and agile supply chains of the future. The fundamental question today for supply chain leaders as they prepare for the future is how can you formulate a strategy, plan, or a design in the face of unprecedented uncertainty? The need for answering this has never felt more urgent. Even before the corona crisis, rapid technological change, growing economic interdependence, and mounting political instability had conspired to make the future increasingly murky and unstable. Uncertainty was so all-encompassing that to fully capture the dimensions of the problem, researchers had devised elaborate acronyms such as VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and a much more uncommon term called TUNA, turbulent, uncertain, novel, and ambiguous. Good strategy creates competitive advantage over time, but the uncertainty of the future makes it difficult to identify effective plan of actions, particularly in the midst of a crisis. The practice of strategic foresight provides the capacity to sense, shape, and adapt to change as it happens. In the wake of the persistent uncertainty, I invite our supply chain leaders for today to share their learnings from the current state of logistics and supply chain industry in Turkey during and post the coronavirus crisis that has possibly been the disruption of the century. Some people also refer to this as the much needed stress test for our supply chains. Nihan, I would like to start with you. You work for Kimberly-Clark, which is one of the best recognized supply chain networks across the globe by Gartner. What kind of challenges did you face during the pandemic, and how did you strategize, plan, and design your supply chain around technology, around people to get through this?
Yeah. Hi all. Before starting, I would like to thank Shanmukh to you and all ISCM India to create such a connecting platform for us to share our learnings. As a representative of Kimberly-Clark, I can say that we invested enough in IT before COVID-19, which enabled us to switch working remotely in a very short time at early stage of pandemic. In previous years, as Gartner recognized our supply chain network across the world as best in class, we are regionally and globally capable of integrating ERP, WM, and TM, which add value and differentiate our supply chain through the crisis. As a company that imports the entire product portfolio and imports more than half of it continental Europe, we currently faced with quantity and price instability in vehicle supply due to fluctuations in the import-export balance, especially during certain periods in truckload freight services. On the other hand, in domestic transportation, the driver's market is shrinking day by day. The effects of exchange rate movements on diesel is on our agenda for a long time. These all increased with COVID-19, and their effects were more challenging, of course. Parallel to the climb of COVID-19, prices moved upwards, while the number of vehicles decreased in both domestic and foreign markets, and procurement times were extended. We encountered similar examples in this area in EMEA region we are affiliated to. These led us to work with at least 2 suppliers for same load point basis with different loading models and increase coverage days for specific products as much as quicker we do. Briefly, I can share my experiences about pandemia and during pandemia and afterwards.
Thank you, Nihan. Moving on to Necmettin. Can you describe the impact on sourcing and how limited exposure to China has helped your cause at Doğadan?
Okay, so thank you for the webinar, by the way. So let me introduce myself. I am Necmettin, working as a supply chain director at Doğadan tea company, which is affiliate of the Coca-Cola company. So we have domestic operation, and also we have nearly 40 countries export operation from Turkey. So I think we are in the lucky side for during the pandemic, because as a global company, when there is something changed in China at the end of December, then in January we realized that we need to improve some of the inventory levels a little bit high. When we saw pandemic in some border countries in Turkey. So we increased some inventory levels, especially for the products that we supply from Italy, and also a small part of China. But mainly, again, we are lucky, as Nihan mentioned, for the technology that they will start before pandemic. We also start some localization or changing the resource part 1.5 years, 2 years ago, with a project that to eliminate the China exports in our operation. So this really helps us, especially for the green tea side. You know that China is the biggest supplier in the world on the green tea side. So we mainly changed sourcing before the pandemic, and this really helps us during that. But of course, we face some small problems, especially for the suppliers in Italy. And we are again lucky we managed this with the high inventory that we made it in February, which really helps us. And now, as a in the world, everyone is waiting the second wave of the pandemic. I think we are now working with the team that how we manage this, because maybe we are not in the second wave in Turkey. I don't know. We will see. But for the other countries like Spain, Italy, it seems that it will again increase. So we are following the news from there, and we talk with the suppliers that how we can manage this effectively. But I think in the second wave, the world is much more ready to that for the inventory levels and for the other things.
Thank you, Necmettin. Coming on to Dr. Emre. Can you elaborate on the impact of the coronavirus crisis on the planning function in the pharma industry? I understand the pharma industry has been up and down a lot during this crisis. China, the main sourcing point for many pharmaceutical ingredients, and the demand for pharmaceutical products has increased. So can you explain the impact on planning as such?
Thank you. First, I would like to echo both colleagues, Mrs. Nihan and Mr. Necmettin, via sending special thanks to you, ISCM from India, as well as TEDAR for the local support and organization. It's a real pleasure to participate in this webinar and share ideas, thoughts, and insights from Turkey over here, how to cope with this pandemic. Indeed, it has been a, how to say, real VUCA case for the pharmaceutical industry, where there have been a lot of unknown changes happening out of control in this, where things have become immediately very, very vulnerable and out of our, how to say, control zone. As you mentioned, China itself constitutes 30% of active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturing overall. And if you add up your country, India, it might rise up to 45%. Almost half of the world's active pharmaceutical ingredient needs were populated via through this both countries, which has become a logistics network to be in place previously. But what we have observed is that it might have brought up a shock impact, starting from Europe, where all the logistics flows as well as the physical flows of goods have been tremendously changing, because demands were popping up at particular prices at paramount level, especially in the EU, in the major EU countries, which were not quite resistible for all of the supply chain, pharmaceutical supply chain, I mean. Then throughout this border closing in China to lockdown and curfew situations, as well as India, everybody moved into a little bit, how to say, a panic, whether it would be possible to get to on time in full supplies indeed. This has become a real challenge, and accordingly what we experience is that visibility has become more and more important, and the main thing used to be the long-term horizon forecasting and accordingly planning. But what we see is that even short-term demand planning under unknown circumstances has become the priority, and even it's going to be a real mandate how to cope with unknown uncertainties. Real VUCA, dealing with real VUCA, which will become a real, how to say, priority for all pharmaceutical companies. First, to be able to resist under these circumstances, to have an agile and resilient supply chain, because it's important. If we look at Turkey specific, there are high level of competition, especially in acute segments of the pharmaceutical sector. So whether you are able to supply the market on a continuous manner or not, you will lose immediately your position in the market. And in this regard, you should be able to adapt immediately to the new circumstances, which requires agility, meaning that, okay, we will be speaking of first, more localization, we can say, which has been an initiative driven by the Ministry of Health since March 2016, to switch to the local manufacturing of pharmaceutical finished goods to maintain the local reimbursement status, as well as an increasing visibility along entire supply chain, encompassing suppliers as well as the wholesalers and throughout even the end patients, to ensure the impact and to be sure of the continuity along the entire supply chain. And indeed, in this regard, yeah, new ways of even demand planning via shorter supply chains and under uncertainty. New parameters will be applied, we can say. Instead of longer horizons, we will focus on shorter horizons with variety of unknowns in this regard. Yeah, the risk parameters will be increasing accordingly, and in my opinion, we will be able to switch into a further demand-driven concept where the supply chain in the operational context will get more integrated into commercial operations like sales and marketing, which I mean into a value-added cycle.
You didn't hear. Can you hear?
We have lost audio. Unfortunately, no. Shanmukh, we have lost your audio. Yeah.
Yes.
We can hear each other. Yes.
Audio. So, Enis, I would like you to emphasize on the impact of on supply chains in the alcohol industry. If you can make.
Oh, certainly. Thank you very much. I would like to repeat my colleagues. I'm very happy to be here with you. For the ones who does not know, Pernod Ricard. Pernod Ricard is the second largest luxury heavy alcohol manufacturer in the world after Diageo, and out of 85 business units, Turkey is taking care of the distribution, importation and distribution of the alcoholic beverages. We have those iconic brands like Chivas Regal, Absolut Vodka, Olmeca Tequila. And with regards to day-to-day challenges we have experienced during pandemic, I would remind you that supply chain is basically an outcome of demand. So when I consider past 4 months, or probably if I can make a projection for the upcoming 4 months, I believe the impact of pandemic on supply was not as severe as it was on demand. What I'm trying to say is we are importing goods from all around the world, and considering the severely impacted countries, say Italy, France, Spain, Brazil, these countries did not ever stop manufacturing. So international trade prevailed. Yes, there had been some delays, but other than air cargo, I did not experience a dramatic disturbance in the overall sea freight or whatsoever. Ports were active, customs were active. So I believe pandemic was not severe on the supply chain capability side, but in contrary, on demand side, which is the cause of supply, I believe the impact was a lot more severe. For instance, in South Africa, the market stayed for months in crisis level 4, where on each crisis level there are a different list of goods which is considered as mandatory or priority goods, and at level 4, alcoholic beverages are not in that list. So until the time crisis level reduces to level 3, you cannot sell a single bottle of drink. It is not as difficult, or it was not as difficult it is in South Africa, but throughout Europe, including Turkey, on-trade business has stopped. I mean, the pubs, restaurants, it was closed. And when you think that international travel was banned, duty-free operation has been finalized. A similar thing for travelers, hotel channel has stopped. So these channels has their specific SKUs, specific products, and the product mix changes from channel to channel. In general, supply chain, the day-to-day challenge, even before pandemic, is a art or ability to make a projection and figuring out potential difficulties, potential risks in the upcoming months in that projection, and ability to eliminate those risks. So what I can say, during pandemic time, that challenge has been increased because of the change volatility of the demand, which is very difficult to predict. But other than that, I can say, at least for Turkey, from supply perspective, supply capabilities perspective, it was a lot more than it could be, a lot better than it could be.
Thank you, Enis. The whole supply chain needs a structural, organizational, tactical, and strategic revamp. Logistics functions today are delivering competitive advantage using the right technology and creating an environment of collaboration among business functions. Technology adoption in the industry has increased since the pandemic first struck us. There was buzz around technology and digital transformation, but now there seems to be intent. How can we leverage technology to design a resilient as well as an agile supply chain? Emre, can I have your views on this?
Indeed, what is foreseen is that, okay, from the traditional models, we need to switch further more agile and transformative models where digitizing the operational model, regardless of which sector we are in, will become necessary in order to survive in the market in a high competitive environment, we can say, and where a solid and robust logistics network would be needed, for instance, starting from your suppliers throughout reaching out to the end customers in a continuous, consistent, and competent manner. By competent, we can say it should be cost effective as well as the quality and the continuity of the supplies should be kept at all anyhow. Therefore, what we will experience is that, okay, in regards to the shorter supply chains, we all will be looking for how to insource all the activities, how to better facilitate throughout the local resources in terms of the supplier network, for instance, versus building the backups or re-evaluating and assessing the existing plans, and throughout the distribution channels. What if the classical distribution channel is looking like? What will be the digitized alternate models for it? Even for pharma, it wouldn't be possible at all. But if we would think the fast-moving consumer goods, I think it will be popping up as one of the important key questions. What might be up to speed channel in this regard to bring up competitive advantage, for instance, even direct delivery to the consumers or additional ways, so on. It will be so important. And for pharma, the traditional model has to be kept, but how to resist with the traditional model under these circumstances, this will bring up even further focus on localization of manufacturing activities, since it has been 4 years, but it will contain and persist its significance, in my opinion, as well as in regards to the increase of the cold chain distribution model, so on. Companies will look for more cost-effective and more up-to-speed solutions, we can say practically. And in regards to Turkey capabilities, the main fact lies on that, okay, the road transport is the primary driver in terms of pharmaceutical distribution, but I think multimodal options can be considered in this regard, even in the midterm, to benefit from the economies of scale approach, as well as to keep cost efficiency as a competitive advantage. And it might also encompass further digitization and visibility here. Visibility and the traceability are the key concepts over here.
Shanmukh, may I add something on this question? It's a question to Emre, but I believe I can also provide my perspective. What I believe, in the past, as companies who are selling their products, they were supposed to show their product on the shelves. So it was to be shown on the shelves to be able to sell. Therefore, it was a question of availability throughout the country. And many companies were not capable to have that network, to have that employment. Therefore, there were several layers in the supply chain between producer and consumer. There used to be distributors. I mean, there exist distributors, wholesalers, key accounts, point of sales. But at the moment, because of the digitalization, because of the existence of e-commerce, those redundant layers are getting away. So there is the producer, there is the platform. Either this is a supermarket chain, a key account, or it's a mobile platform, and then the consumer. So at the moment, the question is not being present at the shelves, but rather the ability to deliver that product to the consumer in time, okay? So I believe a competitive advantage will be coming with the capability of logistics, especially distribution capabilities. I will give you a very, very basic example. At the moment, e-commerce has not rise that many because of the pandemic. Pandemic was just an opportunity, but long before pandemic, there was e-commerce companies taking a lot of actions, initiatives, and those express delivery companies who were in the market for long years were struggling to fulfill the demand. So since this end up with a terrible customer experience, at the moment, Amazon is having a partnership with a delivery company, Trendyol or Hepsiburada, which are all local e-commerce companies, are founding their own express delivery companies to ensure that customer will be experiencing a real-time information and excellent customer service level. This will continue in an increased pace, in my opinion.
Thank you. There was a lot of talk of resilient supply chain planning in our last webinar. Necmettin led the discussion with a beautiful point on creating resilient economies, systems, and processes at large. Logistics and supply chain networks are the backbone of nation states, their economies, systems, and organizations within them, as well as the processes. Thus, we need a resolve to recreate, reimagine, and restore our supply chains of the future, which will not only be resilient, but reliable, transparent, agile, and sustainable. Necmettin, can you elaborate on how logistics as a strategic node can help in this process?
Yes, thank you again. So, as I mentioned before, as a economy or as a health system, so all needs to be much more resilient. This COVID case shows us that. So, I'm sure that no companies has a business continuity plan for a global crisis. We have all business plans, business continuity plans for local or geographical scenarios. So this is one thing that we need to maybe think about much more wider about that kind of global crisis. So pandemic shows us that. On the second hand, so to be resilient is now much more trend in the world in supply chain. So for my opinion, and also as a company, we classify it in 6 pillars. So the first one is the people. So what we mean, we people, if you have a dedicated supply chain resources about for the business continuity plans to develop, because we have all procedures, everything for the business continuity plan, but how much we are updated it or make really resilient plans for that. So this is one part of the people. The second part is the technology. As you, Enis and Emre mentioned, that real-time data, not only, of course, for the customer real-time data is important, but also for our manufacturing sites and also for our demand signals, demand sensing, and everything. So this technology, of course, if we get the data, but how we proceed it, how we process this. So it's a big data, everywhere is data. So how we analyze and make the correct decision. So this is the second part on the technology. And on the processes, the third pillar is for us is process. So if you don't have a SNOP or a robust, strong SNOP or SNOE process within the company, so you have data, but you cannot do anything for that. So this is the process side is also critical to be resilient. And the fourth one is supplier side. We talk with the localization. Maybe I say it is not localization, but maybe to create the multiple sources on the suppliers. But we have some challenges on that. For example, as a company, for example, we know that the second wave will come. Okay, we try to expand our, the supplier pool, which we work only one supplier, single supplier. But the problem is how you make a quality assurance or quality process for that supply, because there is no flights to anywhere. So blah blah. This is another problem nowadays. And of course, manufacturing side is also important to be resilient, to take real-time data, the flexibility of the production, because as Enis mentioned, with the demand shift, much more multiple SKUs within the market, and this really affects for it. And also RGM, to especially in Turkey for the economy, you know, the people want to buy less with a cheap price. So this is the main thing that we need to think about. So revenue management to create a new alternatives for custom consumers is really important. For example, we have a 20 tea bags in one box. Maybe we need to create a 10 or 7 or 5, which is much more reasonable, reachable price for the consumers. And the last thing, as you mentioned, the logistic. So how logistic is important, that it's also we need to create different alternatives in logistic. For example, in Turkey, mainly we are using for the road transportation, but we need to develop as a train transportation. We need to think about that. Also, sea freight is another thing, air freight is another thing. So different type of alternative modes, and also to get the data from the 3PL companies. So I think Nihan mentioned that there are driver shrinkage in the market during that pandemic. So we faced many things, but also 3PL companies also need to think about how they can manage this, because the last 10 years in the logistics sector, we saw that the price is the main area instead of quality. So I think this is that we need to solve that. On the other hand, in each geography, in each business, desired maturity level changes. For example, maybe you don't want to be much more resilient in manufacturing, but you want to be much more resilient in the logistics. So all the vulnerabilities changing according to the regions, according to the countries, because according to this, so it's a combination. Resilience and vulnerability assessment is all both together that we need to think about for that. So logistics is, as I mentioned, key thing that we need to work with the 3PL companies on that.
Perfect. Before we move on to our next question, I'd like to conduct a poll for the audience. This will be a quick 1-minute poll. That's 100% response that visibility will be the game changer in the future. And this brings me to my question to Enis. And this is a very personal question. This question comes from a very personal experience. The alcohol industry was one of the primary enablers of transparency. Since it is deemed to be a luxury product, the basic laws of demand and supply do not apply to this industry. People don't only want to know what their alcohol is made up of, but also where was it made. This makes the supply chain of the liquor industry an interesting case study. But on the other hand, is the firm manufacturing and marketing the alcohol. How does all this visibility benefit the firm with respect to supply chain and logistics operations? Yes.
Thanks, Shanmukh. I also strongly believe Turkey is a very interesting case with regards to alcohol or alcoholic beverages industry. I'm saying that due to two main reasons. Basically, first of all, Turkey is a dark market. So dark market means you are not allowed to promote your products, okay? Make advertisements, show the picture of the bottles, whatsoever. Therefore, even for informing consumers, we are not allowed to address consumers directly. Therefore, whatever we do, that remains in our supply chain. When I say supply chain, end-to-end supply chain, I'm referring to our distributors, wholesalers, key accounts, point of sales, but not the consumer. That is the first challenge with regards to transparency. And second challenge is, I'm sure my colleagues from Turkey will agree on that with me, that's a unique thing for tobacco and alcohol in Turkey. Only for alcohol, I would say, if you purchase a 1 liter of sprit, let's say a whiskey or vodka, 1 liter, does not matter, you are paying almost 140 Turkish liras of tax. And this is pure tax on the price, whatever you are paying, okay? So under these figures, counterfeit product and illicit trade is a major issue. That's the second challenge, because when I consider both challenges, transparency does not necessarily mean the quality, but rather the authenticity or the safety of that product. So for that reason, there had been some applications or processes has been developed by the government. For tobacco and alcohol industry, there is a unique thing you may have heard of in different countries, affiliates as well, that we have tax banderoles on the bottles, and acquiring those banderoles, applying them onto the bottles is a different dimension of our supply chain. And it is not the only thing to ensure the authenticity or provide information to your consumer. Moreover, we are applying security seals. We have developed a product tracking application and that security seal, and we are able to trace our product until it is on the shelf. But again, I'm repeating, these kind of measures are only limited. The scope of these actions are only limited in our end-to-end supply chain. Even to inform our products, we cannot directly contact with our consumers because of the regulation. But coming back to your question, supply chain, logistics, customer service, we are, as a function, helping Pernod Ricard, helping our company to build the brand image of the company. When we have created the perception of our goods in the field, when a consumer sees Chivas Regal or Absolut logo, there is a feeling. But when they have seen Pernod Ricard as the importer, we are the manufacturer, but also the importer in Turkey, and that security seal, that is another thing. And I think only unique to our operation, which I would say a kind of challenge rather than an action, we are working very, very closely with the alcohol regulatory board, which you would not expect in a regular FMCG company.
Thank you, Enis. Moving on. The logistics industry is evolving. Not so long ago, logistics was a back office support function, but today logistics evolved into a strategic function, delivering competitive advantage over our competitors. In today's on-the-move world, where customer expectations change every moment, how can logistics ensure your customer is serviced on time with the right products at the right place and at the right price? How can we maximize customer satisfaction with data available at hand and using logistics networks? This question is for Nihan.
Yeah. As a supply chain and logistics professionals, we are the unit that our companies earn smartly while spending carefully. So we almost always try to get the service we receive at minimum cost and time with maximum quality and sustainability. According to my experience, the way to do this is to follow and demand, choose and use innovative and or alternative service models, and of course, stay in constant contact with suppliers. We also experienced this in COVID-19 periods by sustaining product flow with choosing alternative loading models by staying in close touch with service providers. Sometimes your supplier should be able to come up with an idea that differentiates the service and put it beyond today. Of course, service still would be sustainable. Unstable transportation service with low price means a product that is not on the shelf on time, which is, in other words, dissatisfied consumer. As Necmettin mentioned, we also put people, our employees, in the center of everything, and try to keep engage them to the company to be able to create meaningful service to our consumers. Yeah. These are my experience during pandemic. Also, it will show us the coming period. Things can be around on people topic, both employee piece, both service providers piece. So we think that if we put people on center of everything, we can differentiate the service.
Thank you, Nihan. Moving on to our open questions. These questions can be answered by any of the panelists. The first one is, logistics cost in Turkey as a percentage of GDP exceeds the global benchmark of 10%. Many developed countries today are touching 6 to 7%. What are the reasons for high cost of logistics in Turkey? Dr. Emre, would you like to start? We've already spoken on this.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe quick comment is, practically, considering pharmaceutical logistics, Turkey remains further competitive in comparison to European as well as the Middle East markets due to the network availability and the transportation constraints in this regard. But if we generalize like this, upscale forward, you mentioned, I think one and only factor might be dependency on road transportation, which is also directly correlated with fuel and gasoline consumption in this regard. And as soon as the reality is in front of us that Turkey is foreign dependent on both sourcing of fuel and gasoline, and which are also purchased via foreign currencies, and up to macroeconomic scale, we can say that these dependencies will bear the cost as soon as the currencies will fluctuate and the unit cost of procurement will rise. Accordingly, cost of logistics service in terms of transport would rise, as well as triggered inflation will again make an increased impact on the unit cost of services via the headcount as well as the side benefits incurring. This might be the one and only factor in my opinion. Otherwise, in terms of service quality and network availability, I can tell you that we can sustain a certain level of standards in Turkey.
Okay, doctor, but could the lack of availability of skilled labor be a reason for high logistics costs?
In terms of, skilled labor, it's a general question overall for all the sectors as well as the logistics. I can tell you what is missing, we can say, is, okay, skilled labor, full traceability, as well as sustainable quality, end-to-end quality. These are the three missing pillars, we can basically say. Therefore, even both colleagues, I would agree with both Necmettin and Nihan, even with this pillar approach, to put people into the core of the perspective. It is important, but how to scale and how to improve these people on individual basis. It's a real question on both white collar and blue collar levels. Especially at blue collar levels, we do have certain level of difficulties to keep people well progressing and improving themselves into getting specialized under this logistics, as well as under sectoral logistics. That is one of the key challenges. It might be one of the factors, but I think the main driver lies on the road transportation, the link up to direct dependency on road transportation.
Surely, road transport is very expensive as compared to other transport. Any other panelists would like to add to this?
I just want to add something. So, as Emre mentioned, so I think the price competition is in Turkey freight market, as I see. I mean that from our numbers, it's very hard. By the way, I mean that the prices is not very high compared to other countries. This is my according to our business. But the problem is, I think in Europe or another way, maybe you give just 5-6%, you know, the total cost of logistics, but the quality of the service is very high. So we give maybe the same amount, but the quality is low. So as Emre and Nihan mentioned to people, how we improve the quality. Okay, when you compare about the quality versus cost, okay, we are, I think, far away from the Europe and the other countries, as you mentioned.
Let's move on to our next question. I think Enis has answered this partly, but it's still open for discussion. Digitalization of commerce, mainly e-commerce and hyperlocal logistics, apart from on-demand logistics services provided through various channels, including digital platforms, trade platforms, to be specific, are driving the transformation of the logistics and supply chain industry. How can businesses take advantage of these services to reach the customer faster at his or her convenience, and also to reduce costs? You want me to repeat the question?
I already shared my comments, but I may add one thing. Even though, as I mentioned, we are in dark market, so e-commerce, showing our products and asking consumers to use this online platform is another option for us. But for the countries which can utilize e-commerce, the figures are jumped dramatically. For instance, in China, during pandemic, e-commerce share in overall sales rise from 10% to 45%. So it is more than 4 times higher. So definitely, try to compensate the loss of sales in China. But from Turkey, I may tell nothing.
Can I have Dr. Singh's views on this, please? You want me to repeat the question, Dr. Singh?
No, it's all about e-commerce and hyperlocal market, right?
Yes, and also about how on-demand logistics services like digital freight platforms benefit the whole logistics industry at large. I understand that digital freight platforms don't benefit the larger corporations as much because the larger corporations cut out a deal on a global level. But for SMEs, it's a very innovative way of cutting logistics costs. So how does this play out?
All right. I think there are so many questions within one question, but let me go back to the basic of the question. And if I see the digital themes and initiatives that are important in terms of really making logistics networks more effective for any kind of commerce, whether it be e-commerce or physical commerce, it is very important that we learn to understand this. One of the digital themes that I think is important is that most countries, most businesses have not invested into logistics control towers. Actually, this is very important in terms of whether you are hyperlocal or you are cross-country, or even if you are, across the border. What you need to do is that you need to use your blockchains, your sensors. Can you all hear me?
No, there's some network issue, sir.
Yes, we can, practically.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now we can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
So this logistic control tower uses the new age technologies in terms of blockchain, sensors, automation, and it creates a kind of a visibility across the supply chain. And it produces an amount of data where analytics becomes a good service, data becomes a good service, and visibility becomes. I can give you an example of Pernod Ricard in India. We were doing some training program for them in the month of August, and there was a huge rains across India, and one of their or multiple trucks were struck somewhere in the eastern India, which was flooded, and the supplies had to reach the central India because they could just see, visualize their transportation across the country. They rerouted, and there was an automatic optimization of the route that happened in the logistics. Though it was road logistics, they could really reach the place where the market was waiting for supplies and reroute something later when the flood reside into those areas. So I think it is very important that logistics control towers are used and the analytics, the data that come out from it is used. Second, logistics services also needs to be, within the city logistics, because cities are the major pain points and major nodes of connectivity of the whole economy. So digitally enabled cross-border platforms, city logistics, same-day delivery, by utilizing data to make informed decisions. So that would really make your networks more appropriate if you understand where, what lies, what, and how do you move so that you produce it in a better way. The third is obviously drones, autonomous trucks, 3D, and I think it will take some time before there's a huge debate, but these are very vastly used in some markets in Europe and US. The fourth is circular economy, reverse logistics. How do I really use my reverse logistics framework to minimize my trucks, which is coming back free of this thing, or trucks which are coming up half load, less than the full truckload? How do I really, really maximize my whole options? And it is very important for us to understand that sustainability becoming a major source within reverse logistics, within can we really optimize your truck time and other time? If, as in city logistics, if you build the ring roads, you pass from the ring roads rather than city, you save not only fuel, but you also save the carbon footprints and also become more sustainable. How do we really re-optimize our logistics so that it becomes more sustainable? And finally, I think there is one element, whether you are from truck or by road or rail or by water, you need to realize that businesses need to go beyond collaborating just only with 3PLs or others, but they need to collaborate in terms of shared transport logistics, so that if you have a 40% full truckload, you can have 60% from someone else, or 60%, then you can have 40% from different markets. And if you have around 10 trips of trucks, you could reduce the 10 trip to 3 trips by using this particular shared services called horizontal integration. And a large number of companies, innovative companies, are using the shared warehouse capacity rather than building everything on your own. So this kind of optimization, this is the answer to your first two questions that happens. In terms of e-commerce, I think, yes, e-commerce has a very hyper-local element. What we saw during the pandemic, that even companies like Kellogg's in India, I'm giving an example, they really use the last mile service delivery boys from the food services to reach their breakfast cereals to wherever the demand was. And that was called hyper-local. In fact, e-commerce has the biggest challenge. And not just e-commerce, 10 to 40%, somewhere it has gone from 10 to 80%, because contactless delivery is not just for today, it's for tomorrow, and it's going to stay for long. And maybe even if it changes, it will still be present in some form or another. That means there'll be a surge in e-commerce. How is your omni-channel framework of e-commerce being understood? Do you have shared inventory to actually facilitate logistic services. If you don't have shared inventory, you may get direct to the customer, or you go through the store. You create too much of inventory and too much of pipelines because you are fragmenting the whole thing. So I think that is one element that we need to go for shared logistics. E-commerce has to be looked at into bigger way. E-commerce within a city is becoming good everywhere because of this last mile delivery companies that have come up. Moving away from the main cities to the last mile, where e-commerce does not have a distinct, they need to build their store pickup stores, they need to build a reaching strategy, they need to have a different source of reaching there from transport to rail. And finally, can we have multimodal framework of transportation so that you have the best cost available rather than going unimodal? So these are my comments for the last two questions and the third question that you asked, Shanmukh.
Okay, moving on to our last question for the day. How can considerations into market, geography, and infrastructure while designing a logistics and distribution network make us economical?
Practically 3 minutes remain, so I would like to sum up in one sentence, very quickly, saying that more regional approach would become in place, I think, instead of full global scale applications in this regard. Shorter supply chains, accordingly adapted logistics network with faster deliveries and robustness and resilience to be ensured accordingly. Just in time will diminish, will not totally disappear, and demand-driven supply and shorter supply chains will become further and further popular, and we will see in the stock sort and strategic stock keeping at different nodes of the supply chains. Thank you.
I'd like to share my opinion. In my opinion, logistics will never be economical enough. It will be a never-ending discussion, negotiation, because every dollar you are paying for logistics, or sorry about logistics, any other support function other than sales or marketing, every dollar you are paying for logistics is a dollar that you are not investing on your brand. So there is not a return of that investment. I believe this ideal cost is not necessarily the most economical or the cheapest supply chain footprint, ideal network, ideal warehouse footprint, etc. But it is a ratio of sustained high customer service level divided by the cost. And basically, you are not in a position to quantify the cost of staying out of stock, not being able to sell an SKU for 1 week, because it's not just the loss of contributor margin, but rather you are missing the opportunity to make new customers meet with your new product. As I mentioned, especially in a dark market, it is really an intangible dimension in my opinion. So whatever we are deciding, whatever we are working on, there are ways to do that. Going for a network review, using multi-user warehouses, multi-user vehicles, there are, I don't know, millions of ways to do that, but we should always consider the cost of missing an order while defining all these network reviews and insisting on the cost dimension. We should consider logistics as car insurance. I mean, as long as you don't have an accident, the money you pay for car insurance is just waste of money. So especially under these pandemic days, I think the importance of that business continuity plans and the backup structures, your strength in your logistics capabilities have proved itself. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe I can add, maybe I can add something on Enis and Emre. We try to consider in our supply chain while making decision, try to first consider safety, compliance with government authority, and service to customer and consumer. It is endless story. Spending or choosing the best service option. So we try to consider firstly safety piece, compliance piece, and service to customer and consumer. Then everything shaped on these three pieces, on these three parts. Yeah, of course, it's changed to market, but across Kimberly-Clark, in every decision, we have to first consider to safety, compliance, and service to consumers. You can choose the lowest price, but it doesn't mean if Enis mentioned, if you didn't put the product on time on the shelf, you missed lots of things.
True, logistics has a very high perceptional opportunity cost, but that's where, in my opinion, we need to reduce cost to better serve the market. Moving on. To make effective strategy in the face of uncertainty, leaders need to institutionalize strategic foresight, harnessing the power of imagination to build a dynamic link between planning and operations. Managing the uncertainty of the future requires many tools, some of which have similar or even overlapping functions. Backcasting in the present, contingency planning, crisis simulation, accurate and good quality forecasting, horizon scanning, scenario planning, trend analysis, and war games or stress tests are useful tools that help us navigate through complexity of uncertain, turbulent, volatile, and ambiguous times. It is precisely in this context of uncertainty that the real opportunities lie to gain competitive advantage through strategy. How to get started on this? Invite the right people to participate, identify assumptions, drivers, uncertainties, and floaters, imagine plausible but dramatically different futures, inhabit those futures, isolate strategies that will help you navigate the multiple possible futures, implement these strategies, and ingrain the process. It takes strength to stand up against the tyranny of the present and invest in imagination. Strategic foresight makes both possible and offers leaders a chance for legacy. By that, I would like to conclude the session and take up some question and answers if there are any. The first question is, what could be the main challenges for omni-channel? Anyone? Dr. Singh?
All right. As I said, for omni-channel, the challenges are very simple and very, very new. As we move ahead with rising e-commerce, as we move ahead with multiple framework of online viewing and picking up in a store, or seeing in a store and getting it online, I don't know, whatever be the format that you use in omni-channel, you have a multiple channels that you are servicing now. So your total inventory across this channel will increase. Yeah, and as that increases, your variability in different channel will increase. And as we used to do risk pooling earlier in the framework of managing inventory, today you need to have a shared inventory where you can actually play between these different omni channels or multi channels, whatever way you all call it, so that you are seeing in a very collaborative framework. You don't see it in a siloed omni channels. You see it as each omni channels as a part of a new wave of fulfillment, and the fulfillment centers need to go direct to the consumer, go through the store pickup, whatever it is. You need to know where and how to move ahead. And I think one of the simple principle of that would be that taking the demand plan variability, you can actually look at the point of storage, like the fulfillment center and the in-store inventory and pickup store inventory in a brilliant way with a good replenishment strategy that would help. So omni-channel poses a big challenge for organizations which are not, and it is not only true for retail. Even if you are an FMCG, even if you are a alcohol company, when you are dealing with so many channels where pickups happen and it has to be serviced today, and as this is emerging as a part of it, and in the long run retail is going to be the format of your stores, you have to collaborate your inventory and forecasting and CPFR policies in such a way that we reduce inventory and increase the service level. So that's where one big challenge has come, that people have not been able to work in a share inventory framework. That's from my side. You are mute.
Thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of the session. Jason, can you just deliver the vote of thanks?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I would like to thank all the panelists, Dr. Emre, Necmettin, Enis, Nihan, Dr. Singh, Shanmukh, everybody for being there, sparing your time and coming out and sharing us your insight. Indeed, a good takeaway for the audience today. And would also like to thank all the attendees for being there and attending our webinar. Keep following us and keep liking all our pages in social media, and do check out our videos and subscribe them. Last but not the least, also thanking all the people of Institute of Supply Chain Management, Yvonne, Shanmukh. Without you, this was not possible. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Thank you.